Pro-Palestinian protesters disrupted a remembrance march to honour the victims of Nazi atrocities at the site of the Auschwitz concentration camp.
Yes, demonstrators, they chanted slogans, displayed Palestinian banners and flags reading "Stop Genocide." Some even wore yellow badges in the shape of stars, which appear to resemble those that the Nazi authorities forced Jews to wear shortly after the German invasion of Poland back in 1939.
Well, we can now speak with the Israeli journalist Jotam Confino, because, Jotam, this is an annual march that happens at Auschwitz. It honours the memory of the 6 million Jews killed in the worst atrocity of human history. And it's being protested.
Yeah, I thought we reached rock bottom when Jewish students were barred from entering certain areas on campuses in the United States, but apparently there is a new low, and that is going to Auschwitz to demonstrate against Holocaust survivors with nothing to do with what's happening in Gaza. We have to also mention that some of those who participated in the March of Living this year were survivors from the October 7th massacre, and some of whom lost people on October the 7th. I'm yet to understand what the purpose of this protest is, other than being extremely anti-Semitic. It has nothing to do with Palestinian lives, with a two-state solution, with anything. It's just blatant anti-Semitism. And it's not the only example. Of course, this is as disrespectful as it gets, but we see a lot of very, very atrocious marches across the world with blatant anti-Semitism. London is, of course, one of those places.
And let's be frank, aside from this horrific display, protests are erupting across the entirety of the world. They have been for months. They have been months since this all kicked off. Benjamin Netanyahu, how is he speaking to the public about all this? I mean, huge criticism from leaders across the world to their actions. What's he saying?
So Netanyahu has, as expected, condemned many of those protests, especially at the U.S. campuses, because the signs of anti-Semitism have been so clear. They've had Zionist-free zones. They've called on Hamas to bomb Israel. They've called on Hamas to assassinate Israelis. They are chanting Hamas slogans. It's so vile that the state of Israel has to react when Jews are being threatened the way they are. And we've also seen mob-like mentality in New York, for example, on the streets, not on campuses, but on the streets, where people attack Jews. We've seen the same in London. We've seen it in Paris. We've seen it so many places, even in Denmark, where I'm from, which is a relatively small country with a very tiny Jewish community. But the anti-Semitism there is just extreme. I've experienced it myself, but I know that the community is struggling a lot with this, including during demonstrations. On Sunday, for example, demonstrators at a pro-Palestinian march vandalized the Jewish memorial from World War II. Again, has nothing to do with Gaza. You're not targeting the right people. You're targeting Jews, and they should not be punished for what's happening in Gaza.
And it's such a difficult thing here because, of course, there is a huge amount of suffering in Gaza. Rafah, of course, was entered in the last 24 hours. What's the very latest with the peace negotiations? Because there's been a lot of confusing headlines about whether a peace agreement had been reached or it hadn't been reached, who'd agreed to what. Where are we?
Confusing headline is a very good way to frame this. It's sad to see how easily Hamas manipulates the media. Every time Hamas issues a statement, it's being repeated word for word as if it's the truth. So yesterday, Hamas said, we have agreed to a ceasefire proposal. And the whole world thought, whoa, there's a ceasefire now, and everyone was caught by surprise. Now, that's not what happened. Hamas came with a new ceasefire proposal, which they knew was unacceptable to Israel. Basically, they just stuck to their core demands, which is full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza and a permanent ceasefire, something they have been sticking to for months. There was nothing new about what they said yesterday. So not only did they mislead the media, they also managed to single-handedly put the ball into Netanyahu's court as if he's now supposed to turn down a ceasefire, which technically he is, but there is nothing in this proposal that shows an iota of flexibility. So that's what happened yesterday. And then, of course, the operations in Rafah have begun. Israel has killed some 20 terrorists in the past 24 hours. We also hear about civilians being killed. We knew that that was going to happen because there are so many civilians in this area. So it's just a disaster waiting to unfold, really.
And what about the issue of aid? Many people are rightly concerned that the people in Gaza aren't receiving the aid that they desperately need. The IDF is saying that the crossing is open. British charities are saying, well, one British charity at least, is saying that actually no humanitarian aid is getting in.
So the whole issue about humanitarian aid is one of the most difficult to cover and to understand because there's so much misinformation that's spreading. It's true that, of course, there are certain areas in Gaza where humanitarian need is needed. It goes without saying that there are areas where some people are experiencing starvation. But if you look at the amount of aid that comes in every day, hundreds of trucks, between 300 to 400 trucks every day from several different border crossings. Now, Israel shut one of the crossings because Hamas fired rockets 2 days ago at the border crossing, killing 4 soldiers. But under normal circumstances, hundreds of trucks get in every day. There is a pier being built specifically for aid, which is supposed to be done tomorrow, built by the United States. Aid is being dropped from the air, but we know that Hamas is taking some of this aid. The United States said it 2 days ago, that some of the aid that entered one of the crossings was hijacked by Hamas, and we've known this for months. For some reason, and I'm also yet to understand that, the NGOs put zero blame on Hamas, none. They don't hold them responsible for hijacking any aid, but all blame goes to Israel, which is maybe failing to do a good job, but at least they're trying to get some of the aid in. And this is one of the things that I think we'll look back at on this war as being one of the most unfair coverages of the war, really, is the humanitarian aid aspect.
Yeah, it's so hard to know really what we're dealing with in all of this. How do you make the distinction between who is a Hamas terrorist and who is an ordinary Gazan citizen? It's such a difficult area for so many people. But Jotam Confino, that's all we have time for. Israeli journalist, of course. Thank you very much for joining us.